You are capable of more than you think. We are living in a world that is deceived, blind to its true state, and ignorant of the reality of what God has called each and every one of us to. But today I want to speak directly to your heart, not to inflate your ego or tell you things you want to hear. No, today I'm calling you to rise up from your complacency, to confront your weaknesses, and to step into the fullness of the strength that God has already placed within you. You have been created in the image of Almighty God. Do you hear that? In His image. You have been made for something greater than the empty, fleeting pursuits of this world. But if you live your life according to the standards of the world, you will miss the glory that God has designed for you to live in. It's time to wake up, to shake off the lies, and to begin to unlock the potential God has hidden within you. Now, I understand that many of you are walking around today defeated. I see it in your eyes. There's a sense of hopelessness, of resignation, of settling for less. You've been taught by the world that you are a product of your circumstances, that you are defined by your failures, by your mistakes, by what others have said about you, or by the disappointments of your past. You've been told that you are weak, that you are broken, that you are nothing more than a victim of life's tragedies. But I tell you, that is a lie. The truth is, you have a strength within you, a strength that was placed there by the Creator of the universe. It is not a strength that the world can offer you. It is not a strength that comes from your own willpower, your own self-reliance, or your own resources. It is a strength that comes from the very hand of God, and it is a strength that is not meant to lie dormant, but to be unleashed for His glory and the good of others. Let me ask you something. What do you believe about yourself? Do you see yourself as weak, as insignificant, as incapable? Do you believe that your past mistakes, your present struggles, or your lack of achievements disqualify you from stepping into the fullness of what God has for you? Or do you believe that by the grace of God you are capable of doing more than you could ever imagine? If your answer is anything but the latter, then you are living beneath your potential. The truth is that God does not measure you by your failures or your shortcomings. He measures you by the potential He has placed within you. That is what He sees when He looks at you. He sees what you can become, not what you are right now. And the good news is that He is the one who will make it happen. There is a power available to you today. There is a divine strength, a supernatural enablement that can take you from a place of weakness to a place of victory. The Apostle Paul understood this when he said, "I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me." He didn't say, "I can do all things through my own strength," or "I can do all things because I am such a great person." No, he said, "I can do all things through Christ." And that is the key. Your hidden strength is not found in your own abilities or resources, but in the power of Christ working in and through you. I want you to understand this truth. Your weaknesses are not a hindrance to the strength God wants to give you. They are the very means by which God will reveal His strength. It is through your brokenness, your inadequacies, your shortcomings, that the power of God will shine the brightest. This is what Paul meant when he said that when I am weak, then I am strong. It is in the moments of vulnerability, of surrender, of total dependence on God that His power is most evident. You see, there are some of you here today who have been running from the very thing that God wants to use to display His strength in your life. You've been hiding from your weaknesses. You've been pretending to be something you are not. You've been trying to put on a facade of strength when in reality you are exhausted, broken, and in need of God's grace. But here's the truth. When you stop pretending, when you stop relying on your own strength and your own abilities, when you stop trying to control everything around you, that is when you will begin to see the power of God working in your life. that is when your hidden strengths will begin to emerge. It's not by might nor by power, but by the Spirit of God. God is not looking for self-sufficient, self-reliant people. He is looking for people who are willing to say, I can't do this on my own, but I know that God can. I am weak, but He is strong. I am nothing, but He is everything. And when you begin to say that, when you begin to live in that reality, you will unlock the hidden strengths that God has placed inside of you. Now, let me be clear, this is not about self-help. This is not about you trying harder or doing more. This is about you recognizing that your strength comes from God and that He is the one who will equip you to do all things. It is about surrendering your life to Him, trusting Him with your weaknesses, and allowing Him to take you where you could never go on your own. And I know that some of you are sitting there thinking, but you don't understand. I've tried, I've failed, I've been knocked down too many times. There's no way I can move forward. But I want to tell you something. That is exactly where God wants you. He wants you at the end of yourself, because that is where His strength begins. When you are weak, He is strong. When you are broken, He is the one who can heal you. When you are helpless, He is the one who will empower you. It is not about what you can do. It is about what God can do through you. And today I want to challenge you. I want to challenge you to stop relying on yourself. I want to challenge you to stop making excuses. I want to challenge you to stop living in fear and doubt. You are not weak because you have weaknesses. You are weak because you have been trying to live in your own strength. But when you finally surrender, when you finally trust God with everything, when you acknowledge that it is not your strength but His strength that will carry you, then and only then will you begin to see the power of God work in your life. I want to speak directly to those of you who have given up. Maybe you've faced defeat after defeat. Maybe you've been mocked, ridiculed, or abandoned. Maybe you've faced rejection, disappointment, and loss. And in all of that, you've been convinced that you have no strength left. But I tell you today, God's strength is made perfect in your weakness. Your greatest trials will become the stage on which God will display His greatest works. You may have thought that your dreams were dead. You may have thought that your purpose had been lost, but I'm here to tell you it is not over. The same God who raised Jesus from the dead is the same God who can raise you up from your spiritual and emotional death. He is the same God who can bring hope where there was none, strength where there was weakness, and victory where there was defeat. It's time to stop looking at yourself through the lens of your failures and start seeing yourself through the eyes of God. He sees you as more than a conqueror. He sees you as His child, His beloved, chosen for greatness. He has already equipped you with everything you need to walk in His strength, to fulfill His purposes, and to be the person He created you to be. So today I challenge you to stop settling for mediocrity. Stop making excuses. Stop living in fear. You are more than capable because God has made you capable. The power is not in you, but in the one who created you. It's time to unlock that hidden strength. It's time to step into the fullness of what God has for you. And it starts today. The speech emphasizes that each person has hidden strength placed by God. This strength is not from personal ability, but from God's power. And it is waiting to be unlocked through faith, surrender, and dependence on Him. True strength is found in embracing weakness and surrendering to God's power. Just as Paul said, "When I am weak, then I am strong." The speech encourages individuals to recognize that their limitations are the very means by which God's power can be made manifest. The message urges individuals to stop relying on their own strength, self-sufficiency, and worldly solutions. Instead, true strength comes from trusting in God and acknowledging that it is through His grace and power that they can overcome obstacles and fulfill their purpose. This speech assures listeners that despite failures, disappointments, and weaknesses, God's strength is enough to empower them to rise above challenges. The key is surrendering to God and trusting Him to work through their weaknesses to bring about transformation and fulfillment. You are stronger than you think. I know right now it may not feel like it. Life often brings with it circumstances that make us question our own capabilities, our strength, our worth. We can be so caught up in our struggles, our failures, and our past mistakes that we begin to believe the lie that we are weak, that we cannot overcome the challenges we face, that we are not enough. But I am here to tell you that in truth, you are stronger than you think. Not because of who you are or what you have done, but because of the incredible strength God has placed within you. A strength that is waiting to be unlocked, waiting to be recognized, and waiting to be used for His glory. Let me remind you of something. God does not create weak people. He does not create those who are destined for failure or defeat. He creates individuals with purpose, with potential, with a reservoir of strength that He has built into them. Your strength is not based on your circumstances. It is not determined by how much you have or how much you lack. It is not determined by how much you have and you have the world defines you, or by the obstacles you have encountered. The strength within you is rooted in something far greater, something unshakable, something eternal. When you feel the weight of the world on your shoulders, when you feel like you're drowning in your challenges, it's easy to believe the lie that you're weak, that you can't make it. But listen to me. That is not the truth. You are not weak. You are not defeated. You are not powerless. There is a strength inside of you that you have not even begun to tap into. And this strength is not from within yourself. It is from God. It is His power working in and through you. His strength is made perfect in your weakness. And that is the great paradox of the Christian life. It's not in your self-sufficiency, not in your ability to control everything around you, but in your total dependence on God that your true strength is found. I want you to think for a moment about the story of Gideon. Here was a man who, at first glance, seemed like the least likely candidate for greatness. He was hiding in a wine press, threshing wheat, afraid of the Midianites. His own words were filled with doubt and insecurity. My clan is the weakest in Manasseh, and I am the least in my family. He felt weak, insignificant, and powerless. But God looked at him differently. God didn't see him as weak. God saw the strength in him that Gideon himself could not see, and God called him a mighty warrior. Now, why is that important? Because it reveals a crucial truth about strength. Strength is not always about what we see on the surface. We might feel small, we might feel incapable, but God sees something deeper. He sees the potential He has placed within us. He sees the strength that He has equipped us with, a strength that can rise above fear, above insecurity, above circumstances. Gideon's strength was not in his own abilities, but in the God who was calling him to a purpose, and the same is true for you. Your strength is not found in what you can do on your own, but in the God who is working in and through you. It's easy to let the world define your strength. The world tells you that strength is about independence, self-sufficiency, and control. It tells you that you are strong when you are in charge, when you can handle everything yourself, when you never show weakness. But that is a lie. Real strength, the strength that you have inside of you, is not about being in control or having everything figured out. It is about being able to trust God when everything seems out of control. It is about relying on His strength when yours is gone. It is about standing firm in His promises even when the storm rages around you. That is true strength. And the good news is, it's a strength that is available to you right now, no matter where you are, no matter what you've been through. Think about the Apostle Paul, a man who knew what it meant to experience weakness. He faced countless trials, shipwrecks, imprisonment, and beatings for the sake of the gospel. He called himself the chief of sinners, and yet through it all he was able to say, "When I am weak, then I am strong." Why? Because he understood something profound. It is not in our own strength that we find victory, but in the strength of God. It is not in our own efforts that we overcome, but in the grace and power of Christ working in us. This is the paradox of the Christian faith. The weaker we are, the stronger we become. This is not about human strength or effort. This is about the strength that comes from God, the strength that is made perfect in our weakness. When we come to the end of ourselves, when we realize that we cannot do it on our own, that is when we tap into the strength of God. That is when His power becomes evident in our lives. You might be sitting there right now, overwhelmed by your circumstances. You might be facing struggles that seem insurmountable. You might feel like you are at the end of your rope, like there is nothing left in you. But I want to remind you, you are stronger than you think. The strength you need is already inside of you. It is the strength that comes from God. You may not feel strong, but the power of God is greater than any weakness you may experience. The key is not to rely on your own strength, but to lean on His. You've been created with incredible strength, not a strength that comes from yourself, but a strength that comes from God. This strength is not something that can be measured by the world's standards. The world will try to tell you that strength is about outward success, popularity, or the ability to control your circumstances. But God's strength is not like that. His strength is found in humility, in surrender, in dependence on Him. It is found when you stop relying on your own abilities and start trusting in His. Do you want to know how to unlock the strength that God has placed inside of you? It starts with acknowledging that you are not in control. It starts with surrender. It starts with admitting that you cannot do it on your own and that you need God's help. When you humble yourself before God, when you acknowledge your weaknesses and your need for His strength, that is when His power can begin to flow through you. And understand this, your circumstances do not dictate your strength. The challenges you face, the trials you endure, do not define you. God has placed a strength inside of you that transcends your current situation. It is a strength that is not based on what you can see, but on the promises of God. It is a strength that comes from knowing that no matter what you face, God is with you. He will never leave you or forsake you. He will give you the strength you need to endure, to persevere, and to overcome. You may be going through something right now that makes you feel weak. You may be facing a battle that seems too great to overcome, but I am telling you today, you are stronger than you think. You have the strength of God inside of you, and that strength is greater than any obstacle you face. It is a strength that will carry you through the darkest days, a strength that will enable you to stand when you feel like falling, a strength that will empower you to move forward when you think you can't take another step. But the key to unlocking that strength is surrender. It's letting go of your own efforts, your own control, and saying, God, I need your strength. I need your help. I trust you. It is in that place of surrender that God's strength becomes evident in your life. You are stronger than you think, not because of who you are, but because of who God is. The strength you need to overcome, to endure, to rise above, is already within you. And it is only through Him that you will discover how truly strong you can be. So stop looking at yourself and your circumstances through the lens of weakness. Stop believing the lie that you are powerless. You are stronger than you think. The power of God is alive in you. Tap into it, embrace it, and watch as the strength that is within you begins to carry you to places you never thought possible. The strength you need is not something you have to strive for. It is already there, waiting to be unlocked, waiting to be released for God's glory. There is a profound truth in the statement, weakness is the pathway to strength. The world often teaches us to run from weakness, to hide it, to disguise it. We are taught to view weakness as a flaw, a deficiency that needs to be overcome, covered up, and concealed. But this perspective is not rooted in the wisdom of God. It is rooted in a misunderstanding of what true strength is. In reality, weakness is not the enemy of strength. It is the very means by which God demonstrates His strength. And this is something that every person who desires to live a victorious life must understand. First, let us begin by considering the life of the Apostle Paul, who speaks so profoundly about weakness and strength. In 2 Corinthians 12, Paul recounts a personal experience in which he prayed to God to remove a thorn in the flesh, a persistent weakness, an ongoing struggle that caused him to feel inadequate. This weakness, whatever it may have been, became a constant reminder of his own limitations. Yet, in God's response, Paul received one of the most profound revelations of his life. God said to him, "My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness." 2 Corinthians 12:12. Paul then understood that his weaknesses were not an obstacle to his effectiveness or to his calling. They were the very means through which God would display His power. And so Paul declared, "Therefore I will boast all the more gladly of my weaknesses, so that the power of Christ may rest upon me." Here Paul unveils a truth that is revolutionary to the way we view ourselves and our circumstances. It is in our weaknesses, not in our strengths, that God's power is most clearly revealed. When we are at the end of our own abilities, when we are stripped of self-sufficiency, when we are vulnerable and fragile, that is when God's grace and strength are made most evident in our lives. In other words, weakness is not a dead end. It is the doorway through which the power of God flows. If you want to experience God's strength, you must first embrace your weakness. The world tells you to avoid weakness at all costs. It tells you that you must project an image of power, control, and competence at all times. But God's way is different. God does not look for the self-reliant, the proud, or the independent. He looks for those who will acknowledge their need for Him, who will admit their frailty, and who will rely on His strength. This is why the Apostle Paul could say that he would rather boast in his weaknesses, because it was in those very weaknesses that Christ's power rested upon him. Consider also the story of Gideon, a man who was called by God to deliver Israel from the Midianites. When God first called Gideon, he was hiding in a winepress, afraid of the enemy. He was not a mighty warrior, nor was he a leader who seemed capable of defeating the Midianites. In fact, Gideon himself acknowledged his weakness, saying, "My clan is the weakest in Manasseh, and I am the least in my family." Judges 6:15. Gideon was not the obvious choice for the task, but God chose him precisely because of his weakness. God did not say, "Go because you are strong and capable," but instead, God told Gideon, "Go in the strength you have," and then God reassured him, "I will be with you." It was not Gideon's own power that brought victory, but the strength of God working through his weakness. Gideon's weakness became the conduit for God's strength to be demonstrated. When we acknowledge our weaknesses and embrace them, it is then that God's power is most evident. The Bible teaches that true strength is not found in human effort or self-reliance. In fact, God's strength is often most fully realized in the very places where we feel most inadequate. Take, for example, the experience of Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane. In his humanity, Jesus was at the brink of emotional and physical exhaustion. He was facing the impending weight of the cross, and he prayed, "Father, if you are willing, take this cup from me. Yet not my will, but yours be done." Luke 22:42, Jesus was in the midst of weakness. His soul was sorrowful to the point of death, and he felt the crushing weight of the mission he was about to undertake. And yet, it was through this moment of weakness that God's greatest strength was revealed. It was in his moment of surrender, his moment of greatest vulnerability, that Jesus was able to fully embrace his mission to redeem humanity. The crucifixion, the ultimate demonstration of God's strength, was made possible through the path of weakness. Now let us consider the importance of understanding that our weaknesses are not only opportunities for God's strength to be revealed, but they are also critical for the development of character. If we never experienced weakness, if we were always self-sufficient, always in control, we would never learn to depend on God. We would never develop the humility and dependence that are necessary for spiritual growth. Strength in the Christian life is not about accumulating power or resources. It is about learning to rely on God's grace in every circumstance. It is through weakness that God refines us, shapes us, and draws us closer to Him. He allows us to go through seasons of difficulty and suffering, not to punish us, but to transform us. One of the key lessons that weakness teaches us is humility. Pride is often the root cause of our failure to see our need for God. We may be successful for a time, we may be able to accomplish things in our own strength, but eventually we will face a challenge that is beyond us, a circumstance that we cannot control, a moment when we are exposed for who we truly are. And in those moments, God's grace is sufficient. It is in those moments of weakness that we come face to face with our need for Him. And that is where true growth happens. We begin to understand that we are not self-made individuals, but depend entirely on God's grace. Weakness also teaches us empathy. When we experience hardship, when we face challenges that cause us to feel weak, we develop a greater compassion for others who are going through similar struggles. We learn to offer comfort and encouragement to others, not from a position of superiority or judgment, but from a place of understanding and shared experience. God uses our weaknesses to make us more compassionate, more loving, and more Christ-like. It is through our struggles that we learn to love others as Christ has loved us. Furthermore, weakness teaches us to persevere. When we face difficulties, we are often tempted to quit, to give up, or to look for a way out. But it is in those moments of weakness that we must press forward, trusting that God's strength will carry us through. James 1:4 tells us, "Consider it pure joy whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. Let perseverance finish its work so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything." Perseverance is the fruit of weakness. It is in our weakest moments that we learn to keep moving forward, trusting that God is at work in us, even when we cannot see the way forward. There is also the reality that God uses our weakness to display His glory. In Corinthians 4:7, Paul writes, "But we have this treasure in jars of clay, to show that this all-surpassing power is from God and not from us. The treasure is the gospel, the life of Christ that has been placed within us. But it is contained in jars of clay, weak, fragile vessels. Why? So that no one may boast in their own abilities or strength, but so that God alone may receive the glory. Our weakness, when combined with God's strength, becomes a powerful testimony to His greatness. It shows the world that it is not by our own might, but by the power of God that we accomplish anything. Our weaknesses are not obstacles to His glory. They are the means through which His glory is revealed. The truth is, we will never fully understand the strength that God offers until we come to terms with our own weakness. Weakness is not something to avoid, but something to embrace. It is not a reflection of failure, but of the opportunity for God to work. In our weakness, He becomes strong. In our frailty, His power is displayed. And it is in this paradox that the Christian life is lived. Through weakness, we are made strong. And it is through surrendering our weaknesses to God that we are transformed, refined, and equipped for every good work. We live in a world that constantly emphasizes self-effort. From a young age, we are taught that success comes from our hard work, our determination, and our ability to rely on ourselves to overcome obstacles. We are told that the key to achieving our goals is self-discipline, persistence, and the ability to do things on our own. The narrative of self-sufficiency is ingrained in our minds to the point where we start to believe that if we just try hard enough, we can control our circumstances and make everything happen according to our will. And while there is certainly value in hard work and effort, there comes a point where we must recognize the limitations of self-effort and surrender to a higher power, realizing that true strength does not come from within ourselves, but from God. This is a difficult truth for many of us to accept because we've been conditioned to believe that we are the masters of our own destiny. We work tirelessly, pushing ourselves to the limit, thinking that if we just give more of ourselves, we will be able to overcome every challenge, achieve every dream, and conquer every mountain in our lives. But the reality is that self-effort can only take us so far. Our human capacity is finite, and no matter how much we try to rely on our own strength, we will eventually face situations that reveal our weaknesses, limitations, and inadequacies. It is in these moments of realization that we must stop relying on self-effort and instead turn to God. The Bible repeatedly speaks to the futility of relying on our own efforts. Proverbs 3:5-6 tells us, "Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways submit to Him, and He will make your paths straight." Here, we are explicitly warned against trusting in our own understanding or abilities. It's easy to believe that we can figure things out on our own, especially when we feel capable or successful in certain areas of our lives. But God calls us to trust in Him with our whole heart, to stop depending on our own wisdom and strength, and to surrender our plans to Him. Self-effort leads us to rely on our own understanding, which is flawed and limited. When we trust in our own wisdom and abilities, we inevitably run into obstacles that we cannot overcome on our own. It is in those moments that we begin to realize that there is a higher wisdom, a higher power that we need to submit to. We cannot navigate life's challenges with our own strength and intellect alone. We need to acknowledge that there is a greater force at work in the world, and that force is God. He alone knows what is best for us, and His plans for our lives are far greater than anything we can conceive on our own. Jesus Himself spoke about the limitations of self-effort in John 15:5, when He said, "I am the vine, you are the branches. If you remain in me and I in you, you will bear much fruit. Apart from me, you can do nothing." Notice the stark contrast here. Jesus does not say that we can do a little or some things apart from him. He says, apart from me, you can do nothing. This is a sobering truth. Everything we do, everything we strive for is ultimately meaningless if we are not connected to Christ. Without him, our efforts are fruitless. Our hard work and determination, no matter how noble or admirable, amount to nothing if they are not done in reliance on God's power and grace. There is a temptation to believe that we can handle everything ourselves, that if we just work harder or try longer, we can achieve our goals. But this is a deceptive lie. Relying solely on our self-effort leads to burnout, frustration, and disappointment. We cannot carry the weight of the world on our shoulders, and we were never meant to. Jesus invites us to come to him when we are weary and burdened. In Matthew 11:28-30, he offers a promise of rest, saying, "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light." This is an invitation to stop striving in our own strength. Jesus calls us to surrender our self-effort and take on his yoke. A yoke was a wooden frame placed over the necks of oxen to help them carry heavy loads, and it was often shared between two animals to ease the burden. In this analogy, Jesus is telling us that when we stop relying on our own efforts and begin to rely on him, he will carry the burden with us. We no longer have to carry the weight of our problems and responsibilities on our own. He will bear the load, and he will guide us through life's challenges. When we stop relying on self-effort, we also free ourselves from the pressure of perfection. The world tells us that we must be perfect, that we must have everything together and succeed in every area of our lives. But the truth is that perfection is an impossible standard to meet. We will never be able to do everything perfectly, and we will inevitably fail at times. But when we stop relying on ourselves, we can accept our imperfections and failures as part of the journey. But we don't have to be perfect to be loved by God, and we don't have to be perfect to experience his grace and power in our lives. His strength is made perfect in our weakness. It is through our failures, our struggles, and our limitations that God's power is most clearly revealed. This does not mean that we should be passive or lazy. God calls us to work diligently, to use the gifts and talents he has given us, and to pursue the purpose he has placed on our lives. But the key difference is in the source of our strength. When we rely on our own efforts, we are limited by our human capacity. But when we rely on God, we tap into a limitless source of strength, wisdom, and grace. God does not expect us to do everything on our own. He is with us every step of the way, empowering us to do what he has called us to do. In Corinthians 12:9 and 10, Paul shares a profound insight into the relationship between weakness and God's power. He writes, "But he said to me, 'My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. Therefore I will boast all the more gladly of my weaknesses, so that the power of Christ may rest upon me. For the sake of Christ, then, I am content with weaknesses, insults, hardships, persecutions, and calamities. For when I am weak, then I am strong.